3, 2, 1, here we go. Welcome to the David the Dog Trainer podcast, episode 56.
Yep.
We're back.
We are.
It's Thursday. Hasn't been too long since the last one.
Nope.
And we're here to give you some more hot takes.
In our 3-part series.
3-part series we're going to get back into. So we just posted yesterday on YouTube. Last podcast that we did a review on Upstate Canine Academy. We had a couple people reach out to us asking us to review some of his videos. Tom Davis, obviously, up in New York. He's in like the Albany area, I believe. Mm-hmm. We reviewed his most viewed video. It had like 3.5 million views. He's working with an aggressive German Shepherd. We had some thoughts on it. We discussed them. Go watch the podcast. We're going to do part 2 today. So last video was not super into. We had, again, we had plenty of opinions on it, plenty of opinions on like kind of how it was presented and how it was like worked through in the video, obviously. Today, we're going to not necessarily go in at like most popular videos. We're just going to go at some of his new ones that he has here and just kind of take a look at some of them. And we'll look for something a little bit different than necessarily just like aggressive dog and kind of see if we can find something that might be interesting to discuss. And kind of see what our thoughts are on it. Mm-hmm. Josh, what's new? Anything?
Had a bunch of meetings this last couple days. Some good, what do you call it? Future prospects, I guess you could say.
Prospective clients?
Yeah, prospective clients. I like that. Yep. Some higher end things. So I'm really excited about the future in the next month or so. Mm-hmm. Other than that, we tried to figure out this YouTube thing again. It didn't work out. We're technologically like cursed, I think.
We are trying to figure this out. Where not only can we review, so we're facing hurdles. First hurdle was so that we could actually watch the videos on a TV, record the audio from them, have it sound nice. We worked through that hurdle.
We did.
Next hurdle is trying to actually record the screen in which we're playing the video so that we can start adding it into the YouTube video so you guys can see a little bit more of what we're seeing. Mm-hmm. We try to kind of do the thing with the camera where we look at it at important parts and all that kind of stuff, but unfortunately we can't have it super perfect yet. But hopefully by next time we'll have that solved for you guys.
And it not sound like it's underwater or something. So we're getting there.
What else? Anything else?
Since the other day? No, not really.
Dope. There was, speaking of podcasts, there was a fantastic podcast that came out a couple days ago. So Ivan Balabanov, he is like he is arguably one of the most well-renowned dog trainers like in the world, right? Okay. He's a competitive sport dog trainer. He competes internationally. He has won many an international competition in the protection sport world. Mm-hmm. Very well-known guy. He does a podcast that he started, I think, last year, and he does very infrequent episodes. Like, there's not very many of them you can go listen to, but they're pretty long, and he has pretty interesting guests on, I would say. Like, he gets into a lot of, like, neurobiologists and stuff like that, where, like, he's deep into, like, the true, like, science behind, like, learning and animals and stuff like that. But he did a podcast with who I would consider to be, like, my dog training idol, like, currently and when I first started training, Michael Ellis, who's a trainer out in California. He has a dog training school, and same deal. He is one of the most well-renowned trainers, like, in the world right now as well, particularly in the protection dog world and, just in competitive obedience and things like that. Mm-hmm. And they had a phenomenal podcast that came out of nowhere. They just released it like 2 days ago. It's like almost 4 hours long. I just finished it this morning. Nice. Incredible podcast. We've talked about before how we like to watch some of these videos, and sometimes we're poking fun at them, sometimes we're trying to critique them, see what we like, see what we don't like, try to educate people, things like that. Mm-hmm. After we finish these next 2 episodes here, obviously, I'm going to start getting into some of these guys that truly are like world class. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like people that are not anything to poke fun at. Like people that know what the fuck they're doing. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Yeah. And start to kind of present some other sides of the dog training world that I think, frankly, a lot of pet dog trainers don't know that much about. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Unless you got into the sport dog world and the competitive world, which I say luckily I was introduced right into. These guys are a little bit more in the background with stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But there is just, I equate like so much of my success and so much of my knowledge that I currently have about dogs and about how animals learn and things like that to that kind of period of my dog training career. You know? So I want to start introducing some of these people, obviously, to the world at large.
Okay.
So, gotta catch my breath here.
That was a good ode to Michael Ellis.
Good ode to the gatekeepers.
Yeah.
Call them. The OGs,
I
real OGs in the world.
I also love the man has a podcast and his last name is Blabinoff.
Blabinoff.
Just blabbing off.
Ivan Blabinoff. Yeah. All right, Josh. So we got some videos over here. So a couple that, just his most recent ones he have. A couple that stick out to me right off the rip here. This one looks like, do they have to put this dog down for aggression? Can I train this powerful, stubborn Rottweiler? What else we got? Aggressive dog tries to attack me 5 times. Giant Rottweiler aggressively reacts on leash. I don't know. What do you think? What are you seeing? Anything that sparks your interest a little bit?
I just love literally everything is in caps, and it's all clickbait still.
That's all right. Let's. What do you think?
Oh man,
what do you think?
I don't know. I feel like the aggressive dog tries to attack me 5 times is probably going to be kind of similar, but
I would agree.
I kind of like this one too. This puppy is crazy on the leash. First lesson, and it's just a Airedale or whatever.
I don't know. I like this. Can I train this powerful, stubborn Rottweiler?
Yeah, you like the
Let's
Roddy?
pick this one.
All
right. So, little context before we get into this. So, again, Tom Davis is a trainer up in the Albany, New York area. So, he is a very, very, very well-known trainer in the social media community. We talked in depth last time before we even started watching any of the videos. He puts out a very high quality content. His YouTube videos look really good. His social media presence is fantastic, and because of that, he's gained quite the following. And unfortunately, and a lot of times, some of the most popular dog trainers that you'll find on the internet are not necessarily popular because they are the best trainers, right?
Yeah.
Frankly, and this is something that when I was at the facility and we were kind of discussing some of this stuff a little bit with the other trainers and stuff, Michelle, our trainer, brought up a really great point, which is, good dog training typically is pretty boring. Like taking the last video we watched, for example, like basically start to finish as we worked through that entire 20-minute video or so. It was a lot of fighting. It was a lot of growling, this, that, a lot of dramatics, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I brought up a point at the end of it that most likely almost all of what we saw in that video could have been sidestepped with a couple of tweaks to what he had did, which would have reduced a lot of the pressure on the dog, which would have kind of bridged the gap a little bit and allowed everybody to be a little bit more safe with how they were handling that introduction. And frankly, it would have been less dramatic, right?
Yeah.
There would not have been as much of the growling and the aggression and the this and that. Because our job as trainers is to set these dogs up for success, right? And to look at the scenario before we go into a situation and say we're gonna go fight this fight, right? We're gonna go battle this battle, whatever it may be. Is there a way I can make it easier on the dog so that we're all happy and we're all safe? And then as I start to develop a relationship with these dogs, can I then begin to incrementally put the pressure I need to put on the dog and fight some of those fights I need to fight with them, where it's going to be much less of a big deal, And sometimes it still is visually dramatic and stuff, and there's a lot going on and stuff like that. But especially when you get into like first introductions with some of these dogs, first times meeting them and stuff, our job is to develop a relationship with that dog and have that session go as successfully as possible.
Yeah.
Right? And that's my problem with some of this kind of stuff is when we go into it with the mentality of, like I talked about last time, entertaining as opposed to training and educating.
Yeah.
We tend to do things that are going to cause those reactions consciously or subconsciously for the sake of creating a good video. You know what I mean? So we'll get into this. Obviously, can I train this powerful, stubborn Rottweiler? I've talked before, Rottweiler's notoriously one of the most headstrong, dominant breeds you'll see out there.
Yep.
They could be a pain in the ass to train sometimes. They can give you quite a bit of pushback and stuff. And they can look really aggressive where they're not necessarily that way. They're just very independent dogs, frankly, that, don't necessarily want to do what you tell them to do.
Yeah, exactly.
So we'll see what this looks like. We'll kind of see what we get, and we'll go from there.
Also, my buddy that listens, he was like, God, you guys are going to have to get an ad blocker if you keep watching this dude's videos. I was like, yeah, he has
Do they
one.
make those where we could just not watch the ads?
Yeah, I think so. We're going to have to figure it out. But he was like, yeah, there's one every 5 minutes. I was
Every
like,
5 minutes?
Yeah.
On the beach
All
most
right, here
of
we
my
go.
life. The
Got
connection
some ads
Charlie
right off
and
the
I
rip.
have is making me take this risk.
All right. Right away. Cool video. Listen, what can I say, right? I'm a little jealous of his videos look fucking good.
Yeah.
I'll give the man that. Videos look freaking good.
That's slow-mo.
So we got some new coats. By the time you guys are seeing this, the link is in the description below to purchase yours. They're pretty dope, pretty comfortable. Nice little jacket for the winter.
Dude,
Jesus.
we need a slow-mo shot like that with the link to our fucking store with all of us just rocking our fucking gear.
Buy
NoBadDogs.com. That's his slogan, No Bad Dogs.
Oh, okay.
Listen, no shame with a little plug for the merch. I'm not digging on it. I'll take it.
Hey, what's going on? How are you guys doing? I hope you're doing well. I'm here at my facility. I'm doing some business owner things first. Now I'm doing some dogs training owner things. So we're gonna get out some of the board and train dogs that some of the staff want me to work, kind of get feedback. So this is something that I try to do as often as I can. We'll get out dogs. Maybe they just want to say, hey, what do you think of this? You think we should be doing things different? So that's what you guys are gonna see today. We have a lot of interesting board and trains in with all sorts of different situations, behavioral problems, everything from impulse control to really excited puppies to aggressive dogs. So sit tight, enjoy the ride, and we're gonna get some dogs out. Is this in a...
Man, those jams,
I like that neon he had, too.
Listen, I'm not hating on it.
Yeah.
Right? I'm here to talk about the dog training, but again, there's a reason why you get 500,000 subs on YouTube.
Yeah.
Video looks fucking good.
Aggressive dog or no? Okay. Oh, this is the puppy.
8 months old. He has, Kyle?
Okay, so it looks like this whole video is going to be kind of vloggy format. Obviously, this is not necessarily going to be just him training that Rottweiler, which I thought it was going to be. That's okay, we'll watch it. This seems very similar to what we'll do with our vlog and stuff like that, where we do check-ins with the boarding trains. We see if we can give pointers and stuff like that. So I'll be interested to see what sorts of kind of tips and techniques he gives with this stuff.
Oh, wait. They wanted to work on his impulse control, all of his obedience around distractions.
Okay.
And mostly just patience when he wants something. He demand barks a little bit. And just his overall state of mind and keeping his anxiety to a minimum.
Oh, my God.
All right, you guys, so we just got Ruger out. As my trainers were saying, he's an 8-month-old gigantic German Shepherd.
No Bad Dogs Army. Look at that hoodie.
Yeah, but did you see her shirt? It was a New Balance rip.
No bad
dogs.
Oh my God, they're plugging the gear everywhere. Look at the hat.
And he's working on impulse control,
Bad dogs geared
thresholds, all the stuff that most younger dogs need to work on. So what that means is when he sees something, he feels like, hey, that's mine. So we have to teach manners, essentially. We have to teach him to wait for us for our release. That's ultimately going to help us create the best relationship with the dog. So he knows he's got to go through the handler in order to get exactly what he wants. So that's really good for that impulse control. It's good for anxiety. It's good for all of that stuff that some dogs, especially shepherds who are very vocal, deal with. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to work on this door. We're going to go up to the door, which is a...
So basically, young dog, German Shepherd, high energy, needs impulse control, just needs training, right? When we're dealing with dogs like that, again, like he's saying there, right? A lot of these dogs that come in, if you simply train them when they're young and you teach them to not be so impulsive and go for things whenever they want to go for them and think this is theirs and think that they can control things over here and et cetera, you can really sidestep quite a lot of issues.
Yeah.
So about to work some doorway manners. Let's see them.
Threshold or a portal for dogs. Ruger, sit. So right there, he's not paying attention. He gave me a sit. First time I'm working with him, so I'm not going to be super, super hard on him. He did sit, wasn't as fast as I wanted it to be, but he'll get there. Stay. You can either do an implied sit, which is without the stay, or what most people do is they do the stay.
All right, guys, let's get into technicalities here about stuff. You don't need. First off, an implied sit would not mean implied stay. Implied sit would mean like an auto sit. So we imply that when we go up to the door, the dog should just sit on their own.
Yeah.
Right? Which, in my opinion, is unnecessary, right? Like that's, you know, frankly, like half the time when we're working doorway manners, I always say we don't even use a sit before we open it. We simply teach the dog to not go through the doorway, right? If our goal is to micromanage our dogs as little as possible, but we're constantly needing to tell them sit or else they'll rush through the doorway, we're never accomplishing what it is we actually want. Now, stay irrelevant, guys. This is something that, listen, when I first started getting into training and stuff like that, it's common knowledge, right? As a trainer, you're like, we have to teach stay, we have to teach stay, we have to teach stay, right? But stay is the most redundant word in the dog training language.
Yeah.
There's never a time you're going to tell your dog to sit, but get up whenever you want to, right? Let's say he did not say stay there, right? And you open that door and the dog got up. Why would opening the door be a permission granting thing for the dog to get out of that sit? It just doesn't make sense.
No.
So if you look at your commands, right, everything we ask our dog to do just has to have a clear beginning and a clear end, right? So the beginning is the command itself. The end is the release.
Yeah.
That's it. No need to overcomplicate it. There's not multiple ways you need to do doorways or anything like that. Keep it simple.
Yeah.
Holding, building duration. Good. So this is important for you guys to understand. As soon as the dog says, okay, time's up, I'm over it, you have to split between, is this fair for the dog or is this not? In his case, he's a pretty smart dog. He's been working for
And again, we're creating more complications to this, right? There's no, like, if you put your dog in a sit and they broke that sit, right? There is not a, is it fair or is it not fair? I don't care how you discipline the dog to get the dog back in, but you do have to fix the dog and put them back into that sit position, right? And our rule of thumb is as little pressure as we can get away with, but as much as we need to. So I think what he's implying is like, determine if you need to give a really big correction or a really minor correction, right? But that is not contingent on what's going on around the dog. Actually, it is contingent on what's going on around the dog, but the dog determines it, right? If the dog is really distraction, correction needs to be higher. If the dog is pretty focused in and you just need to make a little adjustment and use minimal pressure, that's sufficient enough.
Okay.
a little bit with the other trainers. He knows sit. So when he gets back up, it's important for you to immediately, there, good, sit. Good sit. So you have to put immediate pressure on him and correct him for that behavior. That's the difference between your dog sustainably listening to the behaviors you ask the dog to do versus not. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break him here. Ruger, break. Good job. He's on his break right now, so he's being a dog. And this is important for you guys too, is you have to give your dog a break. You have to have a verbal cue, just like you have a verbal cue to work. You have to have a verbal cue to say, hey.
There's just too much talking going on right now, right? I thought we were working doorways. Like, what do we, you know, why do I need to give my dog a break after I worked one doorway with them? You know what I mean? Like, you could release them from that sit, but they don't need a break after it. We just need to work the doorways. One other thing here, and this is not just a Tom thing, this is something I see in a lot of dog training videos, right? You need to understand when you're using aversives with a dog, exactly how you're implementing those aversives. So let's go back. Let's look at that example again here, right, that he brought up. So he's got the dog in a sit, right?
He's a pretty smart dog. He's been working for a little bit with the other trainers. He knows sit.
Right.
So when he gets back...
So he broke the sit the first time. Let's look at this. Let me see if I can find it real quick.
Or what most people do is they do the stay. Holding, building duration.
Dog breaks the sit. He used an first to interrupt the dog with a singular leash pop.
Yeah.
Right?
So this is important for you guys to understand.
Second
as soon
time
as
he
the
did
dog
this.
says, okay, time's up, I'm over it, you have to split between, is this fair for the dog or is this not? In his case, he's a pretty smart dog. He's been working for a little bit with the other trainers. He knows sit. So when he gets back up, it's important for you to immediately, there, good. Sit.
That time he said good. And then he gave multiple leash pops, right? So here's the thing, and this is what he's implying with this. He's just not doing a very good job of articulating it correctly. You have to ask yourself, is your dog in the training stage of things, or are they in the proofing stage of things? That's what he means about, is it fair, is it not fair, right?
Yeah.
In the training stages of things, if we're using an aversive in the training stage of things, technically we would want to use a reinforcement. We would use negative reinforcement, which means we would be applying steady pressure and we would be releasing pressure when the dog gets into the position.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Because that would be eliciting more of a positive response in association with the sit, right? So we're increasing the likelihood of the dog getting into the sit position. So our leash pressure would turn on and it would turn off, but it would turn off when they sit, not on like a pop, right? If we're in the proofing stages of things, say we're working sits and we know he knows what sit is, we've taught sit, and we're just going to correct for not sitting, we have to have a clear and consistent mark to identify the mistake, because it's less about reinforcing the dog getting into a sit, and it's more about decreasing the dog blowing us off and not being in the sit. So using sometimes, no other times, I think he just probably accidentally said good there, obviously, because he might have been distracted by the camera, which is okay, whatever. We all make mistakes. We have to have a clear mark, though, to identify that mistake.
Yep.
And then we have to give one clear correction that is motivating enough to the dog. Watch this right here. So, little pop.
Good sit.
Ultimately got him back into the sit,
Yeah.
but it was a sloppy way of disciplining the sit, right? There was no consistency amongst the first time and amongst the second time, right? So you start getting into these, let's call them dogmen. There was a term going around for a while. I believe Chad Mackin, who's another trainer I'm sure we'll talk about at some point on the podcast here, kind of coined for a little bit, which is like dogsmanship, which is just this like, we're using intuition and we're going off the dog and like we're adjusting what we're doing so fluidly with the dog and stuff like that. But it's confusing as fuck, and it gets into this concept like we talked about at the beginning of the podcast when I was talking about like Michael Ellis and I was talking about Ivan Balabanov,
Blabalov.
whatever it was. Where dog training, right? There is some intuition that goes into it, and there is some reading the dog that goes into it. But the things we're doing have to fit into clear scientific realms of communication, right? And if we're altering what we're doing so much on this basis of like, well, it just depends. Sometimes it's this way, sometimes it's this way. Other times, if the dog's unfair about this, it's this way, and blah, blah, blah. It becomes really confusing for everybody. And we start to create this association of nobody can follow along with what you're doing and have a clear black and white if A equals B, or A plus B equals C or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Where, we talked about, we broke down like the training guide. We have our trainers. There's adjustments that get made from time to time for sure, but there is a black and white. We are using negative reinforcement to enforce this because of this. We are using positive punishment to decrease this because of this. We are using positive reinforcement in this case because this is this. You know what I mean? Like there's black and white parameters around things where there's not you have to kind of guess between the two mentality.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And here's the thing. He's still going to accomplish the same thing. He's still going to get the dog to sit at the doorway, right?
Yeah.
But if you're understanding the science behind what you're doing better, you could do it more effectively and more efficiently.
Yeah.
You have to put immediate pressure on him and correct him for that behavior. That's the difference between your dog sustainably listening to the behaviors you ask the dog to do versus not. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break him here. Ruger, break. Good job. He's on his break right now, so he's being a dog. And this is important for you guys too, is you have to give your dog a break. You have to have a verbal cue, just like you have a verbal cue to work. You have to have a verbal cue to say, hey, do what you want to do. But perfect example.
And again, he's not wrong, right? Like, again, they don't need a break after one command here. But that's where you get into the clear end to the position, right? It doesn't necessarily mean the dog is on a break and doing whatever they want to do.
Yeah.
It simply means we're done working on what we just worked on. So we use okay. Some people use break. Some people use free,
Yeah.
It simply means whatever command you were just in, you no longer have to be in.
Yeah.
One of our other board and training trainers walking by with another dog, and he immediately is like, yeah, I'm working. Okay, now I'm not, because boom. That's where positive punishment comes into the equation. Holding him accountable long term will
Just throwing around science now.
Yeah.
Let's see if it's accurate.
Okay.
really help him develop to understand, yeah, there's another dog, but I have to stay in this sit because I don't want to get in trouble. And then in the future, you shouldn't have to really
But again, That's not where positive punishment comes into play. It depends on what stage of the training process you're at. Let's take that exact same situation. We're working with him. We're teaching sit, right? And he does not do the sit because he's distracted by the dog over there. Well, if I'm currently using negative reinforcement to increase my sits, I'm just going to use negative reinforcement at that point. If I'm just using food and I don't have any training collars on my dog, I may use negative punishment, which means I withhold the food as a punishment for not paying attention to me any longer, right? It doesn't automatically equate to that. All this has to do is not what's going on around you. It has to do with where in the training process are you at with your dog.
Back to your dog once your dog is fully trained. So now I'm going to enhance it a little bit. I'm going to tell him to stay out of context of the sit, something he may.
Okay, so I did this at the beginning again, right? So like I said, we're going to find another video to try to just watch some of the general training process and like unbiased, like, you know, like, what do you mean you're going to use stay out of context of the sit? What does stay mean by itself? Right? And if you're using stay independently sometimes, and then you're using it in context of the sit, as soon as you say stay, the dog no longer is expected to sit because you've put them into a different command if you're saying stay is an independent command, right? So we'll see what he's going to do here, but what I'm assuming is he's going to say stay, and his expectation is just that the dog can stand there and just doesn't need to move, right? So at that point, if you say stay when the dog is in a sit, you are actively putting a dog into another command that implies that you don't have to sit. All you have to do is just maintain the same spot that you're in. That's confusing. This is why it's unnecessary.
Never done before, but initially what it's going to do is it's going to help compartmentalize what the stay is. So stay is much different from the sit, and a lot
Preparing.
times they're used together. But I want him to know that stay means you have to stay right here. It's completely separate than the sit.
Okay, then you can't use them together. You can't use it independently and then combine it because you are actively putting your dog into a different command.
Stay. Very good. This is where you can pay a dog if you're using food. Good stay. Okay, break. Yes. So it's important for you guys to randomize your obedience of the dog.
Don't randomize your obedience training unless you've taught everything very clearly. Right? When you are training a dog, again, getting back into the specifics, and this is why, you know, there's a big conflict sometimes between like the pet dog world and the sport dog world, and we look at them as two different things. But they're both just training dogs, right? We're training dogs with different parameters behind the training. We're teaching different things to them, right? But because sport dog trainers, typically speaking, are teaching more precision-based exercises, more complex behaviors, they understand more deeply than a lot of pet dog trainers do that if you want to actively teach something to a dog and you're working on new behaviors, he just said that dog never worked on stay independently, right? You have to drill just that behavior repeatedly over and over and over and over and over and over again until that dog understands that. Then you generalize that behavior. Once you've generalized and proofed that behavior, then you could randomize and you could start freestyling things up a little bit. But you don't do that in the training stages. When we're working with board and trains, there's times I'll sit there and I'll do 60 bed stays in a row. Nothing else, then finish that command. I'll do 60 doorways in a row, then put the dog away. Excuse me. God, I can't fucking talk today. Too many liquids. The second you start mixing things up, you're causing the dog to split their brain and never kind of get into this. Like we rely a lot on in dog training, like the dog kind of getting into in the teaching stages, like an autopilot mode where they're like, oh, sit, this is it. And then after they've done it correctly, you let them keep doing it correct, or after they've figured it out, you let them keep doing it correctly to build their confidence and their stability in that position. If you do 3 exercises, say the dog messes something up 3 times in a row, and then they do 1 good repetition, they're like, oh, that's it. Then immediately you shift to doing something else. You completely fuck with their mind. They're like, wait, I thought that last thing was correct, but I only did it 1 time correct, and now I'm getting corrected because I need to do something else. That gets very, very, very confusing for dogs.
Understands it. What you don't want to do is you don't want to get into what I call a circus. You do a sit, a down, a speak, a stay, a paw, because then the dog doesn't really understand those things individually. So that's what I'm doing with him is I'm teaching him how to stay out of context of the sit. I may ask him to sit out of context of the stay. I may ask him to randomly just sit without coming to a threshold. So making sure that you guys are compartmentalizing these things and really amping the obedience out so you can use it in whatever situations you want to use it in. It's a lovely, lovely, beautiful dog. Good boy. So we get a lot of questions on, why would you use a prong collar on a dog versus a slip or versus any other collar? So the slips, the prongs, the martingales, these are collars that have action. You want to make sure you have action with your dog. I'm just going to switch to a slip collar just to show you, or a slip leash just to show you what this looks like. And we have these slip leashes on our website listed in the...
Now, I don't have a problem with getting into talking about the different tools and stuff like that, but if this truly is what he said it was at the beginning, and this thing that he's doing right now is for the purpose of educating his trainers and helping them work through problematic behavioral issues with their board and trains, again, he's turning this into a him show video, right? Listen, again, we vlog our sessions we do with our board and train trainers, but I'm critiquing the board and train trainers, right? I'm giving them valuable information on how to work through these things, and we're not getting into unnecessary topics like this.
Yeah.
Description below. The main reason why we'll use maybe a prong collar in the beginning with the dog is because he's super strong. We don't want him choking himself out. But the bigger reason, you guys, is when this dog goes home, his owners aren't professional dog trainers. His owner's timing are going to be off. His owner's handling skills aren't going to be as good as a professional. So we're using some of this equipment because we know that the owners moving forward aren't going to be professionals. Ruger, sit. Good, sit. Stay. Good, so that's a distraction. There's dogs out here. There's people out here. Now we're going to amp it up just one more time. I'm going to take this out. Stay. Good. So whatever you guys can use.
I'll also see a lot of times with trainers that use stay. We just made a post about this a couple days ago, I think, because we had like a send home packet thing that we made of like frequently asked questions.
Yep.
And one of the questions is, why don't we use stay? Another reason why people won't use stay is they'll use it as a crutch, just like he did right there. So if you think the dog is going to break command, what you'll do is you'll remind them stay when you think they're going to break it, as opposed to allowing the dog to either do it successfully or make the mistake on their own so they could either be rewarded or corrected, further proofing their understanding of the behavior, right? Like if the truth is obviously you have a beginning and an end to a position. Once he put that dog in a sit, regardless of if he said stay or not, if he threw that thing, it's expected the dog maintains that position still.
Yeah.
To really push and push and push your obedience and keep adding things to the mix so your dog is really good no matter what they're thrown out in reality, the better your dog will be. Okay, break. Now he can have his tug. Good boy. Good job, buddy. So I want to just show you like how I proof a dog out or how I get a dog engaged with me is I'll do this little red light, green light thing. Heel. Good. So you see him, he's forging forward. He's going this way. That's because he just is interested in the dog. So you have to use your body to kind of push the dog around a little bit and make sure that you're dictating the walk or the heel and he's not. Heel, pop, good heel.
Again, inconsistencies in how we're enforcing things, right?
Yeah.
I've seen like Sean O'Shea do this a couple times in videos where he talks about with the e-collar use. He's like, yeah, sometimes we say no and tap the button. Sometimes we say heel and tap the button. Sometimes we do this and tap the button, right? Again, when we're using aversives, if we're using a leash pop or we're using a positive punishment to enforce the position, you never want to condition in your command equals punishment, which is what that does eventually. If I say heel, pop, heel, pop, heel, pop, and I do that repeatedly, what's going to happen is the dog will start associating heel meaning correction is coming, heel meaning correction is coming, which is not what we want, right?
Yeah.
Yes, if he's making an incorrect decision and he's making a mistake and I need to correct for it, we do need to identify that mistake, but we would use whatever marker we would consistently use for a punishment in that place all the time.
Yeah, and I can tell, like, there's literally like 12 things he's saying to the dog, like at all times, like sit, stay. And then he said like okay, like when the release was like okay, but then he also said whatever he
break.
was. Yeah, break. He's like okay, break. Well, why'd you have to say okay and break?
Yep.
You know.
All right.
Heel. Yes, buddy. Good heel. Heel. Good. So we're just doing a little tune-up here. Now there's a dog behind you guys that you can't see, and he's obviously interested in that. Heel. Yes, good decision, buddy. Sit.
again, by repeatedly saying heel in those situations. Heel, right? We don't really use heel. We use commonplace heel, but it's not wrong to use heel. You could. Heel is an implied stay as well. Once I put the dog into heel, it's expected they maintain that position until they're broke from that position, whether with break, whether with okay. So by repeatedly giving that command, what's happening is you're changing the meaning of that command, right? It's creating an expectation that the dog can break position whenever they want if they're in heel, as long as when I say heel again, they come back into position, which again is super confusing for dogs.
Yeah.
Okay, break. Good. That's exactly how punishment systems work. I corrected him, I think, twice on the slip. When I said heel, he's like, yeah, but dog. Bang, he got corrected. The third time I said heel, he jumped right into position with me because he didn't want to get it corrected. He made a good decision. I immediately paid him for that. That's exactly how positive punishment works in association with positive reinforcement. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a little...
It's not how that works. That's confusing.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense. There's not punishment cycles, right? That's not how it works, where we like allow the dog to like avoid the punishment if they kind of fix themselves. Like if they made the mistake, we want to maintain consistency of this mistake equals this punishment all the time, because the goal is not the dog starts fixing themselves before the punishment comes, like with some sort of like interrupter word. The goal is the dog stops making the mistake, period.
Yeah.
A bit closer to the dog in the place in the middle of the room. I'm going to show you how you would start getting a little bit closer without biting off too much. Ruger, heel. Directional change. Keep paying attention to me. That's what I'm doing right here. Pay attention to me. Yes, buddy. Now I got him tuned up. Just gonna get a little bit closer. Ruger, sit. Pressure. Because he knows better, guys. And
See, that time he used negative reinforcement to enforce that. He applied consistent pressure and released pressure when he sit. So again, he's switching back and forth too much.
Yeah.
that's important. You don't want to skimp out on your pressure when you ask a dog to do something and they know it and they decide to blow you off. That's the difference between your dog really respecting you and being responsive and not. Ruger, sit. Yes. Break. Good boy. Good job. The first time I asked him to sit, he's like, yeah.
Again, defining our markers we have, right? Break and yes are two separate markers, right? Yes, in the context that most trainers will use it as, means you're broken from the position to get a reward, right? So we wouldn't have to say break after that yes.
Yeah.
Right? Break simply typically means you're free, right? Some people will use break like their yes. Like these words, it's not that they matter which word that you're using. They just have to have clear meaning behind them and consistent meaning behind them.
Dog. And then I gave him that correction. I gave him that pressure. And then the second time I asked him to sit, boom, he immediately sit. No pressure, nothing. He just did it because I asked him, because the last time he got punished if he didn't do it. And that's what long-term, especially an 8-month-old German Shepherd, you gotta make sure you have that control. You do not want this dog making decisions. He's a really big, powerful dog. So you just wanna make sure that when you say it, you mean it, and he does it. And then the punishment completely goes away, and then it's all positive reinforcement from there. Quick little side note, for those of you who are watching, I just created a Tom's Journal on the Members Club. The Members Club is a community online. If you guys don't know about it, click the link below. $19.99 subscription-based service, super cool. But I just created this journal. I have a lot of ideas always going through me. Obviously running 2 different locations, doing my online consulting, doing my international travel, the podcast, everything that's going on. I always have these things kind of bouncing back and forth. And on the Members Club, I created this journal where I'm putting all those on there. So anyway, I'm just putting all my thoughts and stuff on there, and it's really cool. So if you guys are new to the club.
Listen, dude's a hustler. Again, I'm splitting my mind here a little bit right now. Training, not so much.
Yeah.
Dude's hustling, though. I'll give him that.
You should check that out if you haven't
Quick
yet.
plug,
If you haven't done
shameless
the club,
plug. Check
click
out
the
my
link for more
fucking
information
journal,
or
bro.
join below. I got to figure out if those are blowing
$20 a
heat or
month.
not. Because I think only one of them is blowing heat. Because there's only one flame in all of them.
I've been waiting for this day since I've seen that scissor lift.
I don't know if you need like a key or anything, but I'm gonna.
It's probably in there, to be perfectly honest.
Julia's like, yeah, I've already checked it out. It's ready to go. So you see how this has flame?
Yeah, straight firing.
Yeah, literally.
Not in a good way.
I think that's the only one running in here, which is why it's not heating up. Because that's been running since we.
Fix the one back there though.
Good. But I don't even think they
Comes
looked
an
at
ad.
that.
Some people say our trade-in process feels too easy. They can't believe it's 100% online.
What's going on here right now?
Yeah, I have no idea.
Is there like an on and off switch? Oh my God. I don't know what's gonna happen here. Okay. Why am I going up at the same time though? I feel like I'm going up.
What is happening?
I'm not sure.
Does this look normal? Does it look good? Okay, that is cold air. So it's confirmed that's not heat. That's not heat. That's not it. So it's just that one that's plugged in. Okay, that's enough for today. Let's train some dogs.
To OSHA so they could see him going up there without any sort of harnesses on.
Hi, buddy.
He's very sweet.
All right, here we go.
Hi. He's skinny mini for a Rottie.
A fixation issue.
Like that. Is he fixed?
Those eyeballs.
Yeah, he looks it. Yeah, so he has like this stranger danger thing going on.
And he has no impulse at all.
Okay.
No training. No impulse control means no training.
Yeah.
Very suspicious of the camera. All right, let's do this. So this is something that we're doing that we've never done. I'm gonna have him basically just go up to the camera. What do you think of that? It's not so scary. Yes, it's not so scary. So this is kind of like you guys getting a point of view of what it's like from a nervous Nelly dog. And so just some desensitization and really just neutrality, just making whatever the dog is afraid of not so scary. What is this? It's okay. Good job. Lots of positive reinforcement. Yes. Very good boy.
Got to be careful with that stuff. Now, listen, it's a camera, so like the risk associated with, I don't really have a huge issue with this, obviously, but you have to be very careful with all of that positive reinforcement near a trigger that the dog is uncomfortable around. Keep in mind, positive reinforcement does not just reinforce physical things that the dog is doing. It also reinforces emotional states of mind. So say dog is very, very scared right there, and there's not even anything clear you're reinforcing. It's not like we put the dog in a sit and we're reinforcing the sit, or we have the dog in a heel and we're reinforcing the heel. We're simply taking the dog really close to something they're scared of and then smothering them with affection and stuff like that. That could very quickly cause them to turn and snap at whatever that trigger is if we start building up the arousal while they're still scared.
Good job. So what we did is we just had him go up to Abby and you guys, the camera. So that's, on the fly. What are you going to do with a dog like this? Well, if they're actually afraid of something that's you guys, a camera, a piece of equipment, and another person, and if he's friendly, just have him go up.
If he's scared but friendly but reactive, and you take your dog up to that thing that they're scared of and have that person give attention and stuff, that is how you get bit.
Yeah.
Again.
And be neutral with those things. So don't have.
You're also going into it fingers crossed. It's just like, well, on the fly, your dog is scared of something, just take them up to it. Your dog is scared of this, but they're friendly, just take them up to it. There's no contingency plan of what if when you get there, your dog gets really scared and starts getting very reactive. What do you do then? Right?
Yeah.
There's no...
That person, like I didn't say, hey, Abby, put your hand out. You never want to do that. If a dog's nervous, just be neutral. Just walk around or don't say anything.
You're also, a lot of people do this. So we hear a lot of people, they're like, yeah, my dog has stranger danger issues. And they're fine if the person waits outside and I take my dog out on a leash and I walk my dog up to them and I let them sniff them and I tell them, don't move or else my dog might bite you. Don't look at my dog or else my dog might bite you. And then once they have a chance to sniff them and stuff like that, then they're fine with them. That's such a flawed mentality, right? That's such a flawed mentality because what you're doing is you're presenting a person to your dog and you're saying to the dog, I want you to tell me if this person is okay or not. That's my job to tell my dog that. It's my job to say, hey, don't worry about this person over here. I'm not going to let them mess with you, but I'm also not going to let you mess with them.
Yeah.
And we're going to create neutrality, confidence, and leadership. And then once I have that control established, then I could start socializing. It's also a flawed mentality from the standpoint. Gary Wilkes talks about this a lot on his social media channel, where he says, when you do that, What am I supposed to tell every guest that comes over? Just don't move. You have to cater yourself to my dog.
Yeah.
Because if you move the wrong way and my dog doesn't like it, they're going to bite you, but that's your fault then. Listen, we have to have boundaries both ways. I'm not going to let my guests like bother my dogs and be intrusive towards them, get in their space and stuff like that. But I'm also not going to put them in a position where they can't do something totally realistic and neutral that is going to put them in a vulnerable position either.
Yeah.
Job. Okay, now we're gonna get to work. I'll point out some things about this particular dog when we talk about tug. So if you don't know dogs that well, or if you don't work with dogs like this in particular, obviously this is a Rottie with a tail. Normally they're docked, so it's kind of weird that he has a tail, but that growling is just him being playful. That's all that is. Could that growl be something else for some other dog? Absolutely. He's not doing this aggressively. He's doing this because he's playing rough, right? And the reason why I know that is because of his body language and because his rhythm of his little growls. So watch what happens when I let go. Boom, he brings it right back. So that means it's not a conflict and we're having a good time. So I'm gonna teach you guys in reality how to work with a dog that has terrible impulse control, that could be dangerous because his mouth is flying at that tug that is hanging.
Can he train the stubborn Rottweiler? Now we get to the juicy title of the video.
Finally.
Into your hand. So I'll show you how to do all that. Right now he's got a Herm Springer, I think 3.0, or no, 2.25 on. So we're working on this. Stay. Good stay. Paying him externally. Good stay. Heel. Yes, good decision. Good, that was very good. No correction, no punishment, no pressure. He healed all the...
Notice he's using his yes marker like we described before, how it typically is used, which is a release from position for reward. Like that was a correct use of your yes marker, which again would terminate him from the position, making it so that he could repeat that heel command away from the tug again. Because the dog, after he says yes, is no longer in command, right?
Yeah.
So he's doing it 100% correctly here, right? But it's inconsistent from how he was doing it before.
He wanted that the most. Sit. Good. Heel. Sit.
So now we're using the again to correct the behavior, as opposed to before when he was using the heel with the correction from the behavior. So again, that doesn't add up either.
You guys got to be careful if anybody's trying this at home. You got to be very careful about the frustration that you're building up right now with this particular dog. Okay, break.
The reason why he said that is because a lot of times when you're working against triggers, right? And now in the case of a tug, I don't think you really need to worry about this. But let's say you're working away from another dog. Let's say I have a really reactive dog, and he's kind of doing this kind of, we call it the 180 move away from the dog. And as you go, if you lose focus and you 180 turn with a correction, obviously, what you could find sometimes is if the dog is already in a very heightened state of mind, when you give that pop, it could cause them to turn and redirect back at you. Now, I don't think this is obviously an aggressive dog, so I don't think he really needs to worry about it. But with some other breeds, like you'll see them turn and try to come at you over that. And it's, again, a redirected bite, we don't typically constitute as like it's an aggressive dog necessarily either, because they're not intentionally like, I want to bite you. It's just a response from that frustration, and they're just kind of taking it out on whatever's closest to them.
Yes, good boy. Much better. Good job. Good job. So with a dog like this, ultimately, you don't want to build too much frustration and redirection. You'd want to use a slip or a dominant dog collar.
That would not change things, right? That's a Larry Crone thing. He really likes Larry Crone, I know. Larry Crone talks a lot about you can't use prong collars with some of these dogs. You got to use dominant dog collars and this and that. And literally the reason for that, if you're breaking it down, is because a dominant dog collar is actually cutting off the dog's airway when you pull on it. So you can apply steady pressure and stop a dog from biting with it, obviously. But that's not the solution, right? The solution is just teaching the dog that redirected bite doesn't work and reducing that arousal. And because a dominant dog collar or a slip collar is going to be less aversive than some of these other tools, you're actually going to have less control over the dog with it.
He goes like that slip and that dominant dog collar isn't going to do anything, and I'm going to go for a ride. It's very powerful. So that's just my information to you guys out there. Any other trainer that's watching this. Heel. Heel. Good boy. Good job. Heel. Good job. Sit. Good sit. Heel. Heel. Yes.
Again, mixing up the use of the heel repeatedly, mixed with an like the first couple times when the dog made the mistake, he just repeated heel. Then that last time he said even though the dog did the same thing it did the last 4 times.
Boy, very good boy. No, sir. So this is impulse control, you guys. This is
No, sir, is not a marker we use.
Yeah.
him going, gotta have it, gotta have it, gotta have it. It's right there, it's right there, it's right there. You can't have it until I release you. Stay. No, stay.
Preemptive no markers, right? The dog had not made the mistake yet, but he decided to tell the dog, no, stay, preemptively because he was about to kick the tug, getting back into people using stay as a crutch, right? And the first time the dog went for it, he didn't say stay. He just corrected the dog for it. The second time he said stay. The third time he said no, stay. So have some consistency behind what the expectation of the dog is. If the expectation of the dog is if you're in position, regardless of what happens, you're not allowed to have this tug, the only thing that should happen is one clear marker we use that predicts a consequence.
Yep.
That's it. Simply no with a correction. He goes to do it again, no with a correction. He goes to do it again, no with a correction. If you want to kick the tug to test it, kick the tug without saying anything, and if he goes for it, no with a correction. Maintaining consistency, making it very clear for the dog, which makes it easier for them to avoid that correction later on, and making it more clear and consistent for owners or trainers to follow along and do this at home, as opposed to having 10 variables of different things you may need to say, depending on how you feel in that moment.
Good. Heel. He's not been ever introduced to this, so this is very, very hard for him. Everybody wants a Rottweiler until the Rottweiler wants to do Rottweiler shit, which is be stubborn and strong.
This does not look like a stubborn dog. This actually seems like a fairly compliant dog that's a little bit insecure at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
All that's happening right now is he's just testing the dog. The dog's not doing anything stubborn there.
Takes a little bit of time. We're going to get there. Leave it. Nope.
So now we get into he's using a leave it command for it, adding even another variable, right? Why would we have a leave it is another command that I don't use very often because I save leave it for things the dog is sometimes allowed to do. And there's almost nothing that I would need to say leave it for because I have clear expectation behind things. Let's take this exact example. If he were in a break right now and he went for that tug, sure, you could use leave it in that moment, right? Because you're in break, you're allowed to do whatever you want to do, and you're allowed to have this tug sometimes, but I need you to temporarily leave it. That would be an appropriate use of that word, right? But he's heeling the dog right now. The dog is in the heel position. So the dog is breaking heel. So what you're doing is the dog breaks heel. You're giving a different command as opposed to enforcing the command that the dog just broke, which is very confusing. And then a lot of people use leave it for shit like, the dog picks up a chicken bone on the street or a piece of paper or whatever, things the dog is never allowed to have, where I don't want to have to be contingent on saying leave it every single time I pass by one of those things. I want my dog to just understand those are things he's never allowed to have. So I just use no with a consequence for those things. So I actually create an inhibition.
Yeah.
So I'm not really using
Alternating between and no as well, inconsistent with the no markers.
any punishment other than verbal. It is a punishment for sure. Come. No. He's really frustrated there, so you gotta be very careful. I'm waiting for him to give me some sort of calmness, engagement. Like right now, let's see what he does here.
Here's the problem with all of this. The frustration is coming from the inconsistencies, and frustration comes from the dog not knowing what's expected of them because he's doing too much. He's working on too many things and working on all of those things in completely different ways every time he goes to work on them, right? So of course it's going to frustrate the dog. Of course it's going to.
Yes, break, get it, break, yes, good boy. Very, very good, right?
If you're struggling with having your dog leave something as well, it's typically a good bet to not use the thing that they're leaving as the reward for leaving it, right?
Yeah.
So right there, dog successfully passed by it for the first time, so he told him okay and let him go get it, right? Typically, if I want to reinforce that, I'm going to reinforce with some sort of reinforcement that I have on my person to get their attention further off of that thing. Like, yes, you didn't go get that thing, so you could have this thing over here, right? We used to teach a food refusal in Mondioing and sport dog stuff that we used to do. And the one rule when you were teaching that behavior is whatever it is that you're teaching the dog to leave, they never are allowed to have that thing.
Yeah.
They're never allowed to have it, because if you give them even this inkling that in a minute you're going to be able to go get that thing, it's going to keep that anticipation of reward and keep them fixated on that thing, where we want the fixation to come off of that thing and shift onto us.
Yep.
There is what you saw, is he got conflicted. He's like, I can't have this, fine, I can't have it. And I'm like, no, 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 you can have it when I say break. So you saw that he basically shut down and didn't want to go after the tug because he's been told so many times, no. Compulsion, right? That's exactly what compulsion training is, in benefit to the dog. Bad compulsion training is sit, the dog doesn't sit, and then we slam them down, or vice versa with the
Compulsion training simply means you're using a degree of compulsion to get the dog to not take something. He's not referring to good compulsion training, bad compulsion training. He's just referring to more intense or less intense.
Yeah.
That's it.
So this is good. We're making progress. We're just keep working through this kink. Leave it. Leave it. Come. Good boy. Good job. Good job. Okay, so now I'm going to come up. Leave it. Okay, break. Break. Yes, good boy. Good job. Good man. Okay, break. Yes, good boy. Leave it. Good, leave it.
Dude, his voice.
Good, leave it. Good, leave it. There you go. Good, leave it. There you go. Good, leave it. Sit. Okay, break. Good job.
And I want to reiterate here, it's working, right? Like, he's accomplishing it. Like we said at the beginning when we were talking about the doorways, you're still going to get the same result eventually out of the dog, right? Because even though his markers and all that are very random and inconsistent and confusing and stuff like that, he's still physically stopping the dog from going to those things, which will create a degree of impulse control, obviously, right? The problem is that this long-term has a very difficult time being successful or transferable, because you can't create black and white meaning behind stuff. So nobody can, it's very difficult to tell the owner, again, if this happens, do this. If this happens, do this.
There we go. You did it. Rottweilers are tricky dogs. They're smart, they're intelligent, they can be possessive, they can be aggressive, they could be strong-willed, but they're very sweet, very strong dogs at the end of the day. So you be very, very careful when you're dealing with stuff like this, but that was just a demonstration on how you can work on impulse control with a dog like this. At home, you guys will probably have a lot more success with a dog that's a little bit more sensitive to yielding to pressure, but because he's a Rottweiler and really wants what he wants, it just takes a lot more time and a lot more reps. Where's my buddy? Hi, mister. Oh my goodness. Look at all your toys, buddy. This is Hawk. You guys probably know Hawk from all of our other videos. He's now at our new facility, has his own room, but he doesn't fancy everybody, so that's why I'm in here and Abby is not. What do you got? He's got the Hermspringer Mango. Look at this thing. Look at that. Oh. I missed you. I love this boy. So this is a Hermspringer Mango Tug. Super high quality. Oh my God. You can find it on our website as well.
Oh, yeah.
But they're really good tug toys for like a larger dog. Yeah, that's my buddy. Out. He's like, all out, but I'm not gonna get down. Sit. Down. Yes. Yes, my boy. I love this boy. All right, back to work.
That is his personal dog, I believe.
Your work
Other
can
ad.
feel much smoother with Monday.com WorkOS. This
What's the deal with the puppy?
That's the.
He's lit.
Oh yeah, he's fired up.
Their biggest struggle is just going to be the physical limitations of an older person with a crazy dog like that.
Yeah, so prong collar for sure.
Yeah, he's on one.
Okay. All right, so what we're doing, obviously you guys can see this crazy boy. So we're gonna start kind of teaching him and teaching you guys at home how to start dealing with some of this crazy puppy behavior. So this is a perfect example. Here's the thing full of treats. Leave it. So impulse control, leave it. Leave it. Nope. Leave it. Leave it. Leave it.
This is my problem with slip leads also. Like, stay consistent about the tools you want to use, right? He said the dog has already been on a prong collar. Prong collar is just going to be a more effective tool to stop this. It has more of an aversive component to it. And forget the inconsistencies of using leave it and enforcing leave it and this and that. The thing is, like, this is another thing to point out here, right? You could not say anything and just do what he's physically doing. You'll accomplish the same thing. That's why the verbal component of what he's adding in, because of the inconsistencies, is completely unnecessary, right? But you see how he's needing to use quite a bit of pressure with those pops on it. Not that I think there's a problem with it necessarily, but if the dog's already been on a prong, you're going to get away with using significantly less pressure to enforce these behaviors.
Yes, good, leave it. My timing wasn't as good as it needed to be, but leave it. Yes, well done.
So now he's actually doing it correctly again, where when you're teaching your leave it command, you reinforce with something separate from the thing that you're having them leave. And notice how the dog's attention is shifting away from those things and onto him, which is exactly what we want in these cases.
UT effing full. So that was really, really good. So you guys just saw there how he kind of got over that with using, again, punishment to teach him, no, no, no. And as soon as I started throwing those things, leave it, he then started looking at me instead of the distraction. Good. So we're just going to work on some leash pressure here first. Heel.
Heel with multiple pops. Again, conditioning in your heel as a negative, which is not what you want.
Heel. Good. Heel. Good. Pay attention. Pay attention. Heel. Good. Pay attention. Sit. Good boy. So starting to calm things down a little bit for him. Again, I'm just getting him engaged with me. You can see him start to get calmer as I give him a little bit of tune-up here, and I say, hey, pay attention, bud. Heel. Nice and loose leash. Good heel, buddy. Heel. Directional change. No pressure. Well done. Heel. Yes, buddy, good decision. I get a lot of questions on, can your dog look down? Can your dog sniff? And I'm not doing competitive heeling, so I don't really care if he's looking around. As long as the loose is leash and he's on my left side.
The loose is leash.
The loose is leash. The leash is loose.
I've done that plenty of times.
So for his whole life, he was probably taught to be crazy. And when they're puppies, so he's only 6 months right now.
Now, again, getting into things that he's somewhat accurate about here. So, we're not teaching competitive heeling. So I'm not going to be as anal about things as I would, if I were teaching like a focused heel or something like that. So like dropping the head to the ground a little bit or looking around and stuff is not a problem. But you can't have your expectation that the loose is leash.
Yeah, the loose is leash.
That the leash is loose, because if you're on a 6 foot leash, well, the dog can be within that 6 foot bubble, and that's not what heel is, right? So I look at what is the physical expectation of what the dog is doing, right? And as long as they're in the physical position of what I want, while loose on the leash, obviously, that is the expectation of things. Sniffing is gray, because sniffing is the first sign of the dog lacking focus. That's the first sign of them committing from focusing on me to focusing on something else. Now, focus doesn't necessarily mean look at me. Focus just means mentally in tune with me, where if I speed up, they speed up. If I slow down, they slow down, et cetera, which, again, they don't have to look directly at me to do. And that's what our healing is all about, is it's about attention, right? Which is how you get that position to begin with, obviously. So if you start allowing the sniffing specifically, sniffing is no longer attention, and it turns into the dog then veering off to other positions, which is not what you want, obviously.
So when they're puppies, it's not a big deal if they do things like this and they jump in your lap and they are cute and we pick them up and they're rambunctious and they get the zoomies and we're like, yay, go, go, go. Well, when they start to get older, stronger, faster, it's not good. So you got to make sure. I get this question all the time, is like, when should you start training your puppy? Immediately. Mom has already been doing the work, and then you pick the dog up and now you're asking it to live with humans who don't speak dog. So you want to immediately start implementing structure so you don't have any of this. If you start training right when you get your puppy, you don't even have to, at 6 months, your dog is good to go. It's right in the beginning, you get all the stuff done, and then they go off on their way. So now we got to distract.
Correct. Further reiterating on that, though, I think he was implying this with that, but just like straight out saying it, don't let the dog climb all over you. Don't let the dog bite at you. Don't carry the dog around everywhere when you're a puppy, because the dog will get bigger. And if you set the expectation of like, oh, until 4 months old, I'll let the dog do this, you're training the dog to do that behavior, which is going to make it even harder to stop it once they're bigger.
Action out, so it's going to be a little harder. One mistake a lot of dog owners make too, when they're out and about with their dogs, when they're puppies or when they first get them, their dog engages with another dog and we think that's cute and we think that's fun. and you're teaching the dog that every dog they see they can go and play with, which is not realistic or fair or safe or responsible. So in the beginning, if you teach dogs like they do with service dogs how to ignore and avoid food and things like that, you can then say, you know, the B word, and then the dogs can interact on your terms. All right, so you guys, Austin, the Australian Shepherd that was in my channel earlier, he's in that room and he's doing good. So that's good. You guys always want updates on dogs. I never really see them again for the most part. My trainers kind of take care of it, but he's in there and he's doing good. Good heel. Good. Good heel. Good. So just using that food lure, that target, to start integrating in next to close to another dog. Good, good. You notice I'm not using a contact food lure when I'm passing the dog. I'm actually just holding it up here because I want the dog to make a good decision instead of getting kind of lured through. So after a couple minutes of some tuna.
Describing what that is. Again, not totally wrong about this, but he is still luring the dog through it. So we refer to that as a connected lure versus a disconnected lure. So they're both lures, which luring just means you're teaching the dog to follow something to help them shape positions and stuff like that. A connected lure would be when the dog is actively engaged in the food. So they're licking that treat in your hand while you're guiding them onto something. A disconnected lure is more visual for them. So they're looking at that thing and following it, right? So he is still luring the dog through, but you typically would switch from a connected lure to a disconnected lure as a way of starting to fade out that lure completely. So you'd have connected, then you would have disconnected, then you would have none, with the dog just expecting to understand where they should be.
Here, he's doing very good for a younger dog around another dog. Good heel. Sit. Heel. Good. Good.
And that's why he's able to drop
So
the
just
leash
using
at this
a little
point,
bit of
is
ghost
because he's using that
handling here.
connected lure.
Good job.
obviously.
For a
Or that
6-month-old dog
disconnected lure, I
in our
should
board
say.
and train program, he's doing great. Got some time with him, so he'll continue to do good. So anyway, that's like what a first session looks like for all the dogs that we're working with here. Definitely a rambunctious, excitable dog. You got to make sure, it's very important that you guys are using that. Well, you don't have to, but to get the results that I did as fast as you do, positive reinforcement, positive punishment, negative reinforcement, all the 4 quadrants are really important. That kind of, you got to switch gears constantly to say, okay, this is what this does, this is what this does, and then that way you can really shape the dog up pretty quick. It's what we call a unlimited dog trainer, not having any limitations to the things that we're doing with the dogs that we're working with.
Start calling myself
There's some
that.
dog training companies out there that only believe in one quadrant,
Unlimited.
which is what we call limited dog trainers. They're very limited to the tools and some of the things that they can do with dogs because they're only using one way to work with the dog. So that was a very good example of tuning the dog up really quick, using all the quadrants, tons of positive reinforcement, a little bit of positive punishment, and at the end, drop the leash, walk by another dog, we're all gravy. That was very good.
Another thing we'll see a lot of people do is they'll say positive punishment as opposed to negative reinforcement, even though negative reinforcement technically is like it's a less aversive thing. It's more fair on the dog. It's actually in the dog's brain perceived as a positive to them.
Yeah.
It sounds, we have a negative association with negative reinforcement because negative is in the word.
Yeah.
You know, anytime people think of shock collars or prong collars or this or that, they think of negative reinforcement. They don't think of positive punishment. It's a different thing to them. You know what I mean? Yeah, I think the general consensus of this is like, listen, like, again, like he's training the dogs, right? In the case of these videos, right, the dogs look eager to work, right? The dogs look fairly happy and stuff like that, which is great. That's something we want to be striving for as trainers, obviously, right? But it's also our job as trainers to continue poking holes in the way that we're doing things and to continue focus on making sure we're being as scientifically accurate as possible with what we're doing and creating as many consistencies as possible between things. And I think that, you know, we went over like in an aggressive handling related thing, so not necessarily a training related thing, just how he handles going into an aggression case. We discussed that a little bit. Now we're looking at just watching him train dogs that I would say don't have any major behavioral issues. They're just a bunch of untrained dogs that need impulse control. And it's not the worst thing that you've ever seen in your life by any means. Like I said, like the dogs are learning, the dogs are engaged, and they're happy to work, which is a positive. The problem is there's too many inconsistencies with his timing and his overall communication, right? And that's the big thing that I think separates a lot of the good trainers from the great trainers, is that understanding of technical aspects behind stuff, right? Because let's say he wanted to eventually get into like some sort of competition training or do something much more high end than just basic pet dog obedience and stuff. He's gonna have a very hard time having that translate to that world when you get into teaching much more precise behaviors. When you get into, with your focused healing, teaching head position, when you get into your retrieves, get into generalizing things, get into getting your dog not stuck on tools. That's another big aspect where your markers really come into play. And the reason why we have markers is because our markers are what is identifying to the dog what's good and what's bad. Then our punishment we're using, or our negative reinforcement, or our positive reinforcement, or whatever it is we're providing, then just backs up those markers. That's what keeps the connection and the focus on us and not on the food or on the tool.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's where stuff gets limited. And listen, like if you're going to use tools forever, right, and you're going to be contingent on having your e-collar or your leash and prong forever or whatever it may be, which, listen, you never get totally off of those tools, right? I still use them with my dogs, obviously. But my dogs still understand everything and understand that those tools or those food or reinforcements are not what's actually getting them to do these behaviors.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that truly is the key with a lot of this stuff, and truly why a lot of that timing and kind of scientific aspect behind things really comes into play. So interesting video from the last one to watch, obviously. Again, I hope you guys kind of understand some of the things that I was saying with it. I hope you guys have a general grasp as far as why some of those things are really important, obviously. And like I said, we'll watch one more video. We'll try to find one more video next time. That's a good variation from even the two that we've watched so far to see if we can get as balanced of an approach as possible on things.
Yeah.
So, what do you think?
There was better information in this one, definitely.
It wasn't, the thing is, there wasn't anything that was as like detrimental in this one.
Yeah.
You know, like most of my biggest problems with the last video had to do with the safety aspect of how he was handling that dog and the amount of pressure and stress that was associated with the situation that didn't need to be there. You know what I mean? So it was a much more like important video to watch from that standpoint. This one, there's no fallout from any of that. You know what I mean? Like, you're not gonna, nothing is gonna, the dog is gonna be fine. The people are gonna be fine. It's not a big, none of that is a big deal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I'm not as emotionally charged by it. I just think that, again, we should be looking at how to improve that communication and tighten up those obvious holes. Right?
Yeah. Well, and I wonder when, like, he does send homes with his clients, like, does he clean up his like commands a little bit, or?
I don't think so, you know?
Yeah.
And again, not saying this to bash him or anything. I think a lot of that, you know, I work with, you know, trainers that are good, competent trainers, right? That don't understand that stuff that deeply. Because like I said, like it really is, I got extremely lucky when I first started getting into this industry from the knowledge that was around me that I was able to pluck from as far as the true science behind stuff and the true accurate use of markers and rewards and punishment and this and that. You know what I mean? Where a lot of trainers aren't exposed to that, because in the pet dog world, most people's idols are the Tom Davises.
Yeah.
They're the Sean O'Sheas. They're the Jeff Gelmans, who, again, I'm not saying they're horrendous trainers by any means.
Yeah.
I'm just saying they're limited trainers. Now, he was using limited trainers from the stance of the quadrants you're using, which I understand, obviously. I'm saying limited from the standpoint of your vast knowledge of how everything works.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And, you know, even though those people are putting out good dogs, right? They're training dogs fine. They're limited from the standpoint of their understanding of all of the whys behind everything. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's just, you know, because he even said it himself, he's like, you know, home, like regular dog owners are not the same as, you know, professional trainers. And my thing
he was saying their timing is going to be sloppy. Their thing is going to be this.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you're like, here's the thing. If we're starting at 10, right, and we're expecting that the owner will only be able to get to 7, that I understand that.
Yeah.
But the problem is if we're starting at 6, the owner can only get to 4.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Exactly.
Which will cause them to be less successful over time, right?
Yeah.
And that's a commonality we see amongst trainers in the Cleveland area. Like, we work with a lot of dogs that have been to multiple other trainers before, and if those trainers don't have that deep knowledge of the whys behind things, the owners are going to be even less successful than they're going to be.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep, exactly.
So we have to knock their knowledge up a couple of steps so that they could surpass that.
Yep.
So, 'cause there's kind of like a tipping point of how sloppily you can do something while still being successful.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
from trainers as well as owners, obviously. And, you know, our owners, for example, right? Like, they're sloppy with stuff sometimes. It's normal. You know what I mean? Like, they don't have perfect timing. I 100% agree with Tom in how he said that, right?
Yeah.
But because we're holding them to at least a higher standard with their sloppiness, it's kind of above that tipping point of it'll still work.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So,
Yeah. It was good.
I would agree. Good podcast. I
Yeah.
think we're doing another one this weekend, and then we'll be back to our regularly scheduled every Monday for you guys.
Yep.
So until next time, hope you guys enjoyed it.
Yep.
We'll see you.
See you. Bye.